Welcome to Author Stories, the podcast where we talk to the best writers in the industry and discuss writing and the creative process. Whether you're a writer, a reader, or both, we hope you'll find something here that makes you love books and the writers that create them. You can find archives of all of the great conversations I've had with authors over the years at hankgarner.com. Take some time and browse around there. I'm sure you'll find a new author to love, find inspiration for your own creative life, and find a new story to get lost in. Let's thank some sponsors who make the show possible. We're so happy to have our friend Crystal Pico Watanabe as a sponsor of the show. Crystal is one of the best editors in the business, and she has just debuted a new service that I think you'll absolutely love and will help you to up your writing game. Pico's School of Wordcraft and Editing has just debuted, and the first course is called Properly Punctuating Dialogue. It's a mini course and can be completed in just about 20 minutes. It covers the basics of dialogue punctuation. Authors can get access to the new school and the course for free by signing up for Crystal's author newsletter, Notes from Pico. Go to picoshouse.com/newsletters. That's picoshouse.com/newsletters. More in-depth courses will be added in 2020. Make sure you don't miss a thing. picoshouse.com/newsletters. Unwilling Souls by Gregory D. Little. Books 1 and 2 are only 99 cents for a limited time. The gods are rightfully imprisoned, and Cess intends to keep them that way. But her terrorist father has other plans. Gregory D. Little's Unwilling Souls is a pulse-pounding chase through an epic fantasy world of adventure, sinister conspiracy, and a magical industrial revolution fueled by harvested human souls. Cess is the daughter of powerful parents who would very much like to kill one another and who therefore pretend she doesn't exist. An apprentice jailer of the gods, Cess spends her days learning to forge the tools needed to maintain the gods' prison. When her terrorist father attacks the prison on her 16th birthday, Cess is forced to flee after the secret of her parentage is revealed. Suddenly on the wrong side of the law, Cess realizes the very father who abandoned her may be the only one who can protect her. But some secrets are darker than parentage. On her way to find her father, Cess will uncover truths about her family and herself that will shatter her understanding of the world and risk the return of the gods themselves. Unwilling Souls and its sequel, Ungrateful God, are on sale now for only 99 cents. The third book of the series is coming early next year, so now is the perfect time to get up to speed. Unwilling Souls by Gregory D. Little. Books 1 and 2, only 99 cents for a limited time. Writers, I have an amazing tool to tell you about. A revolutionary writing tool for planning stories, Campfire Pro is what novelists need to go from the seed of an idea to a detailed plan that's ready to be executed. Complete your character design, create a timeline, and track your world building all in one place with our downloadable desktop app for Mac and PC, without the annoying subscription model so many apps are using today. Visit campfiretechnology.com for special holiday pricing on Campfire Pro today. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to have Clint Emerson on the show with me today. He has a fantastic new book. It's called The Right Kind of Crazy: My Life as a Navy SEAL, Covert Operative, and Boy Scout from Hell. Clint, I love this book. I laughed. I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. Such a great book. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm glad you liked it. That's always a plus.
Clint, we begin each show with the same question every time, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
Oh, boy. I think it dates back to, I think somewhere middle school, approaching into high school, I figured out that I had a knack for writing essays, and I realized that, I rather write, a page, 15 pages, the reports and all that, than do any of the other options. If there was an option to write something, I'd rather write it than do like a multiple choice test, So, and then I think, when you start getting good grades at it, like anything in life, if anybody pats you on the back or you get a trophy, you start to go, wait, maybe I am good at this. And I don't think I'm good at it, but I got good grades. So, and then later I read the book, Stephen King on writing, and anybody who writes has probably read that. And it's still to this day one of my favorite books on how he was able to basically tell his story, but integrate, how to write a book as well in the middle of it. And I still, today, I mean, like I said, that book is just awesome. And most Stephen King fans, I don't think, give it the recognition that it deserves, because that book made me laugh. It was educational. He's obviously a great storyteller, but the fact that he snorted a line of coke and wrote Cujo in 3 days, I mean, it's amazing to me. Or that he wrote The Running Man in 48 hours, and it's just like, holy crap. Now, yeah, was he high as a kite? Sure. But
Sure.
But hey, there's probably worse ways to write a book.
Yeah, the fact that he got a cogent sentence out of it is amazing, and he deserves all our respect for that alone.
Yeah, to pull it off.
Yeah.
That's back when getting published was hard.
Right. Right. Oh man. So you had this love and realized that you could communicate with people. But that was not your desired career path. I think I heard that from when you were a little kid, you had a chance encounter with someone, and that set you on a path to what we're here to talk about today. Your story and the right kind of crazy. What was it that you wanted to do? When you became an adult.
Yeah, I always tell people that all the way up until I was about age 10, I wanted to be a ninja. But when you kill somebody, yep, and I think that's most little kids. It's that or a superhero of some sort. So mine was ninja, and then I found out that if you kill people as a ninja, it's called murder. But if you kill people as a Navy SEAL, then you're a hero. So it's like, oh, all right, it's all about picking the right side of the line in life, right? So I ran into this SEAL in an airport in Germany, and he had some tattoos. I was a very inquisitive kid. I asked him what they were all about. He told me. He gave me a little background that I kind of go in depth in the book. And he the funny part of the whole story is he put me on the journey of being a SEAL. Once I became a SEAL and could do some research, it turns out that guy was a phony. He was a fraud. So my whole dream during my entire childhood was driven by a complete fraud. So that's kind of funny.
Oh, that's really funny.
Yeah.
When you discovered that everything was a fraud, did that change the way you felt about what you were doing, or had you developed enough desire and love for it while you were there that that guy's bull crap didn't matter so much?
Oh no, it didn't affect me at all. I mean, I was already a SEAL before I could. One, you question it. You go, all right, well, now I've got the clearances. Now I'm at a SEAL team. I happen to be at the SEAL team that this guy was probably at based on the operations that he told me about. So you start asking guys that had been around during that time frame, like legendary, like Vietnam era frogmen that were still at SEAL Team 3 when I checked in. And I would ask these guys, like, hey, do you remember doing any stuff in Libya during the 80s? Remember when we bombed Libya? I mean, did you guys hear about any SEALs going in there and do anything? And they're all like, no, we didn't do that. So then I was like, well, maybe it's, at the other, secret command, SEAL Team 6, right? They're like, that's a national level command. So eventually, halfway through my career, I ended up there. And then when I was there, I asked around, hey, did any guys back in the day go into Libya and do all this cool stuff? And they're like, no. So yeah, I mean, but I was already, sold, and I was already 100% in when I found out the guy was a fraud. It turns out that there is a statistic about 360 people that you meet that say they are SEALs. 360, one out of 360 is legit. It's one of the most fraudulent occupations out there. And it's a lot of,
that is insane.
Yeah, a lot of guys going around saying they're SEALs, and they're not. So, for you and for your listeners, do not believe for a second that somebody who tells you a SEAL, that they really are. There's just not that many of us. And I hear it all the time. Oh, my friend's a SEAL. Oh, I'm married to a SEAL. Oh, it's like, no, there's just not that many. So keep that in mind.
How many do you think there? I mean, if that's something you can say, like how many active SEALs are there at any given time?
Oh, we are, what people don't know, the exact number, I could probably give a guess, but I probably won't just for the sake of sensitivity. But I can tell you that we are the smallest special operations unit doing relatively most of your bigger operations, right? So there are less SEALs than there are Rangers. There are less SEALs than there are Green Berets. There are less SEALs than there are Air Force PJs and combat controllers. So at any given moment, we are always the smallest special operations force when you talk about qualified operating guys. So I think, it's small. But you have a lot of guys who have been in and gotten out, so over time, of course, you're going to have thousands of dudes roaming around that are former or retired SEALs, but it's still a very small percentage of the population.
Right.
Yeah.
So you made it to SEALs. You made it through the Navy, through BUDS, then at becoming an actual SEAL. What time when you got into SEALs? What year would this have been?
Let's see. I went in 94. So yeah, I went in 94, and it took me about because the path I was on, about 2 years to finally earn my trident, put on the bird. So, you go to BUDS, and then for me, I was a medic. So before you were allowed, back in the day, before you went and checked into your SEAL team, you had to go through all the different medical schools, pass those, then you could check into your SEAL team, and then start perfecting and learning the more advanced skills. And then your peers decided when you got to put your trident on, which is the symbol that we wear on our chest. These days, it's much different. They go in and they go from BUDS to what's called SEAL SQT. They get their trident, then they go to a team. They kind of cut out the peer portion of it, which I think crazy. I think your peers should always decide when you get your bird, and I think it should be, because there's a lot of great guys out there. There's a lot of great guys that can shoot a bullet straight. They can do push-ups, pull-ups, swim, run all day long, but that does not necessarily mean they've got the personality, the attitude, or the courage to be a SEAL. And the only way you can determine that is by hanging out with SEALs and then letting those SEALs assess you and making sure you are the right kind of guy for the job. But so they took that part out, and they base it now solely on whether you perform a certain way, make sure you're safe, and then if you do all that right, then you get to wear a trident. So you kind of see the difference, right? It's a much more standardized operating system now. You're not mass producing them because it's still the same number of SEALs getting qualified each year, but I certainly saw the difference. A guy who got his trident right out of training versus the guy who has to earn his buddy's respect, perform to a certain level, and then be accepted by his teammates in order to get a trident. That's a much different guy. Yeah.
So you went in the mid '90s and served as a SEAL for several years. I don't know, 5-6 years before 9/11 happened. What was the world like pre versus post 9/11 for the position you were in?
Yeah, pre 9/11, there wasn't a lot going on, obviously. But being in special operations, you tend to go look for things to do, and your leaders turn into salesmen, and they sell certain operations in order to get us, real world experience, because at the end of the day, that's what you're there for. And so pre 9/11 was a lot of maritime operations in the Persian Gulf. There was an embargo against Saddam at the time. He was not allowed to export much of anything. Some of his imports were controlled as well. So, of course, we were there to govern that because there was a lot of smuggling of oil, weapons, I mean, you name it, out of Iraq. And so we would, in the cover of darkness, all, with our jet boats and our ninja hoods on and night vision and body armor, we would scale the side of blacked out ships in the middle of the night at 20 knots in the middle of the Persian Gulf, climb up the side and sometimes some crazy sea state, and then get on board and go straight to the bridge, take control of the ship and kind of move it into international waters and hand it over to NATO forces. And it was really, I talk about it in the book. It is probably one of the most exhilarating, adrenaline pumping operations you can do. There is really not much I can compare it to as far as climbing up the side of a moving ship at 20 knots in rough sea state, no one knowing that you're there, getting on board and being like modern day pirates. It's the best feeling in the world. But some of these guys started getting smart, the smugglers, and they would, if they did think we were anywhere near them, they would steer these are big container ships. And they're also sometimes really fast moving dhows. But they would always hug that the international water line in the Iranian waters is 12 nautical miles, right? So from 12 nautical miles from any shore around the world is still considered their water, right? And so they would, if they knew we were there, so these smugglers would go into Iranian waters, knowing that we weren't allowed, right? Because then that's kind of like an act of war. So we'd have to pull off or sometimes even jump off these big ships as soon as it went into Iranian water. Yeah. So anyway, it was a lot of that. It was pretty cool. And then that led into the USS Cole, which was, a big eye opener, that terrorism is real and that it's definitely focused on the United States.
One thing I've always wondered, Clint, is as someone who is involved as deeply as you guys are, and you see the real story and what actually happens. And by the time it filters out to us, the typical American population, it has been spun and has been filtered through a number of people who sanitize and clean up things for public consumption, for whatever reason. We won't get into the reasonings behind why that stuff happens, but I think we all, if you're aware at all, you know that the information we get as the end product is probably not what really happened, or at least not all of it. As someone who is there involved and, literal boots on the ground, what does it feel like knowing that you have the real story and knowing that the story that we get and what people think of you and what really happens is probably very squirrely compared to what really happens?
Yeah, when I was in and I would conduct a certain operation or whatever I was involved in, and then you see it on whether it's CNN or Fox, it doesn't matter which one you watch. The reality is probably 85% of it is either inaccurate or it hugs accuracy, but it's not exactly accurate. It rides a line.
Hugs accuracy. I love that.
And so whether you're far left, far right, in the middle, at the end of the day, the Department of Defense and government agencies will only tell you or tell the media what they think they should in protecting national interests, secrets, and everything else. And then the media just adds in the rest, or they get a bunch of talking heads that try to fill in the blanks, and then the public starts forming their own opinions on stuff. So perfect example would be Iraq, was there a smoking gun? No. But did we come across plenty of smoking guns that just never made the news? Yes. It's when every Iraqi soldier that we either detained or killed has a gas mask, atropine, and epinephrine, and you ask them, why are you carrying all this biochem stuff on you? Do you think the United States would actually use that on you? They're like, no, Saddam, he will use that on us. So when your own people are carrying precautions for weapons of mass destruction, and when the dictator is saying that, he has them, by the way, do you really need a smoking gun? I don't know. There's a lot of debate around Iraq. Heck, there's debates around Afghanistan, but all of it driven by the news. It has nothing to do with us soldiers on the ground. We just want to do our job. So, but I can tell you and be rest assured that when you watch the news, you watch anything on TV, or on social media, the odds are there's a whole lot more to the story.
Yeah. Well, and it's so strange depending on the political tides and which way the winds are blowing, or how marketable a particular event is. People like you, Navy SEALs or special ops folks get either painted as superheroes or vilified. Mm-hmm. And I would imagine as folks like you who just want to get up and do your job, and that has to be really frustrating to know that your hands are tied in a lot of ways from communicating the reality of the world.
Yeah. I mean, what's funny is when you're in the middle of it, for us, we weren't allowed to have social media, and you're not really sitting still long enough to pay attention to the news. So you will hear about things, but it's in and out in 1 minute, and we're off to the next training evolution, or we're on the next deployment, and we don't really take time to, investigate anything that we may hear, because we're just moving at the speed of light, and we frankly just don't have time for it. So now when you get out, and I've been out for 4 or 5 years, and you see like how it really is, and you're like, wow, it's amazing that how many people believe what they see and what they hear. I mean, it's a lot of gullible people out there, I got to say. Yeah. And to get emotional about it on top of it is even crazy to me. It's like, really? I mean, especially all the politics, it's like they're all millionaires. They're all serving the people. And it's like, how do you serve people? And whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you got gazillion dollars in the bank. I mean, I don't care which side of the house you fall on, just look at the facts. They're all millionaires, and they're all supposedly serving the people. And I think you'll find the answer that they're not really serving the people.
Right. Exactly. At spending time as a Navy SEAL, you and you detail all of these adventures in the book, and we're going to come back around to the book in just a minute. But after your time as a Navy SEAL, you actually spent time at the NSA, and my understanding is this is a very strange thing for someone to go from a special forces type or a Navy SEAL career to then as a covert operative. How did that transition happen?
Well, I was like a founding father of a program within the Navy for naval special warfare, trying to, take operators and turn them into operatives, because you take a guy who's got all that combat experience and know-how, he's a self-starter, he's a leader. You could take a certain percentage of those guys and assume that they'd probably be pretty good operating alone in a different capacity. And so I had the honor of kind of helping start this new world, and as you know, some of this stuff was kind of redacted in the book. But
yeah, we're going to come to that in a minute.
But I was just one of the guys that helped start kind of a new program. And we ended up leveraging the interagencies. And so that led me to the NSA, and which is really cool. But you got to, for me, it was, I had an interest in technology, and that place is like a playground for, technology geeks, right? So the NSA, most people don't know. I mean, the NSA is like 7 to 10 times larger than the CIA. So they have a considerable amount of capability that would just blow people's minds. I mean, when you get worried about, North Korea and Russia and China and all those popular villains in the news, I usually don't worry about it because I've kind of seen our capabilities and our know-how. And so being there, it was really eye-opening and pretty cool. I always tell people, like, as a SEAL with, different clearances, you get read in and you get to know all these different programs, and you think, oh, I kind of know about a little bit of everything. But when I went there and there was all these other doors that open, and you're like, holy crap, you have no idea. It's just, it's all much more bigger, much more advanced than Tom Clancy, all of your big, like, government military writers don't even come close to what reality is, even in the fiction. The fiction world has no idea. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So the books we read and the movies we see where we're like, you think, oh, that's so far fetched. There's no way, things can happen on a granular level like that. You're calling BS on that.
No, yeah, exactly. I would say that the movies paint a pretty accurate description, but just then if you were able to toss in the truth into it, then it would be like 1,000 times cooler, better, faster, whatever it is, Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Nice. So after all of that, you start transitioning to the civilian world, and you, like a lot of people that leave your career, I think, start looking for ways to offer your services to the world at large. And you wrote a couple of really popular books, 100 Deadly Skills, really, really entertaining, breaking down, how people can be more aware of the world around them. And I know with Escape the Wolf, you're kind of taking some of those same skills and to the corporate world. What was that transition like for you, and how do you start looking for ways to, like you've done, to share what you learned with people and to help them integrate, common sense things into their life, or what should be common sense?
Yeah, it was. Part of it was I had a plan. And then once you kind of have a plan, then you start stumbling through it the best you can, with a little bit of trial and error and some failures. And then you learn from all of that. And then all of a sudden you go, oh, okay, this is kind of my path. And so my path ended up what I thought was going to be more global security director for some Fortune 500 company transitioned into, I'm just going to start my own company. And it didn't just, okay, I want to start a company. I wrote a book called Escape the Wolf as a 2-week project. I took 2 weeks of leave while I was still in the Navy, and I put together as much information as I could on how to become a gray person when traveling abroad so that you wouldn't be targeted. And I did this in response to there being absolutely nothing inside the government channels that, had any of this information. So I was like, well, heck, I'm going to take all of my experiences and I'm going to kind of compress them into a philosophy on how to travel a lot more smart with more awareness so that people don't find themselves in a bad situation. And so anyway, it turned into a nice little handbook called Escape the Wolf, and it breaks down a whole bunch of acronyms, and people love acronyms, so I loaded it with acronyms and a little bit of philosophy and experience And it was something I self-published and then passed around literally for free because it only cost a couple of bucks to print if you order 100 or more, whatever the deal was. And so I'm handing them out to, people at the NSA, and some of my bosses there were handing them out to family and friends like, hey, this is a good little read. And then before you knew it, it ended up in the hands of a retired FBI guy that was the director of security for the Wall Street Journal, Dow Jones. And so he calls me one day and says, hey, I'd like for you to take everything in this book and teach it to my 700 most elite journalists that travel the globe and go to hostile environments. And at that point, Escape the Wolf transitioned from a book into a company. And I was still in the Navy. So I had to figure out how to do all that. So number one, you got to go ask the Navy, hey, can I have permission to start a company? Of course, you get I tell a story in the book about this. There's a little drama involved, but anyway, I ended up getting permission. Went through some drama on my way out of the Navy, but ended up, getting that thing up and running and turned the book into e-learning. That put me into the e-learning world. And to this day, I think, some of their journalists still have to take the e-learning that we developed. And it kind of, then now you talk about the transition. Right now I'm out, and that's what I'm doing for a living is providing best practices and protocol to employees of small to large organizations. Doesn't matter if you're, small business, large, or if you're a place of worship, a private school, you name it. We've developed everything from what started as safe travel abroad programs. Now we're doing cyber threat awareness and natural disaster, a lot of emergency preparedness, active shooter. So yeah, it's what else could you ask for? You take something you write and it turns into a company and you can make a living off of it. I mean, that's the American dream right there.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. It is. So it comes around to it's time for you to tell your story more fully. There are obviously aspects of your story in the other things that you've written, and all the stuff that you do and the training that you give obviously is all informed by your life and the things you've been through. But what brought you to want to tell the full thing in what we now have as the right kind of crazy, which is, I mean, you really lay it bare from your childhood and, the kind of kid that you were and the troublemaker, all the way to the dream of being a SEAL and, the covert operative and, all the way through. You lay it all out in this book. Mm-hmm. What was the journey to get to there?
Well, once I was out, when you're in, it's funny. People will introduce you, as, hey, Clint, he's a Navy SEAL. And you're kind of like, you don't need to say that part. It's when you're active, you truly are trying to be a quiet professional. And I think most guys do a really good job of that while you're in. Of course, SEALs have a reputation of when they get out, they sign a book deal and they write books. And, it's kind of tongue-in-cheek fun for us to make fun of each other for doing it.
And you address that right in the front cover.
I sure do. And because there's a lot of people in LA and New York that make a lot of money off the SEAL brand, and they never served one day in the military. And so I tell SEALs now all the time, if anyone's going to profit off our brand, it should be SEALs. And, you have, especially me, 20 plus years of what I've been doing. And when you get out, my primary job is, Escape the Wolf and crisis management for, any company or organization that wants it. But the other piece of the equation was that other SEAL books, other military memoirs were written in terms of kind of more gravitating towards the myth vice reality. You read some of these others and they don't really talk about their own personal flaws. They don't talk about the drama that they've definitely had in their life or the things that they were not good at. They tend to I get it. They're focusing on the positive aspects, but unfortunately, when you have kids reading your books, um, or young adults that aspire to be SEALs, and if they're reading a book that paints the portrait of the perfect guy, the perfect athlete, then they're going to think to themselves that's, oh, well, I can't do that, And frankly, I've had a lot of people since I get out that just assume that, well, if you're a SEAL, then you must be morally, ethically, like always correct. Your integrity is probably at its highest. You're a knight in shining armor. You must be built like a linebacker, and you probably are a genius. And that's just not the case. I mean, I wanted this book to reveal my truth, and my truth is based on my 20 years of personal experience, that no, we are not morally, ethically inclined guys. The culture is more like what I said at the beginning. We are more like pirates than we are like knight in shining armor. You're lucky I haven't said fuck 15 times already, but I try not to, because I never know, what the culture of your podcast is. So, but the reality, I wanted reality and truth. I wanted people to know that I was a skinny, scrawny little punk ass bitch when I was a kid. And that continued all the way up until I joined the Navy, because I knew that if I hadn't taken my troublemaking, risk-loving ways to the right side of the line, then I probably would have ended up a nobody, nothing, criminal, whatever. And I was smart enough. That's where I'll only give myself credit, is that at least I was smart enough to make the decision to be a bad guy in other people's countries and not in our own. And that's what I tell anybody. If you're growing up and you got a little bit of criminal in you, join the military so you can go be a criminal somewhere else. And I say that loosely, because obviously you go overseas and you follow the rules. But the reality is anytime we're operating in someone else's country, most of what you're doing is illegal and by the law of that land. But because you work for the United States government, you're allowed to do it. So pick the right side of the line. But I wasn't going to give the audience just the typical smoke and mirrors of, I'm a great guy. I'm not. I embrace my flaws as much as I embrace the little positive attributes and contributions I have to society. But I'm a troublemaker at heart. I enjoy it, and it's just who I am. So there you go.
Well, you start the book off. Well, first off, you begin it with that little note, about just addressing right up front. I'm a SEAL, and I wrote this book, and I think that we ought to have, control of our story, and our brand, and then you've got this great prologue where you really set the tone for the book and for kind of what we think about you as we're first meeting you. In this little story of something that happens on a Texas highway, and that really sets the tone for the book. Did you, when you started writing this, did you start with that story, or did you realize later that you should insert that at the beginning as a kind of tone set for the book?
No, that was I did not set. The book was not going to start with that. That was you storytelling is interesting, because for me, what I visualized how it would go at the beginning was nothing like how it ended up being published. Right. That story, it's funny when you need something that's standalone. And you're like, we need something standalone. We need something that catches readers' attention. Which one is it? And when you start really going through your book, when it's a mess, you realize, well, that one is pretty easy. It doesn't rely on any background of other people, because you know the deal. As soon as you mention one person, well, now you gotta build that character or who that person is. You
gotta follow that thread through.
And so that story was somewhere else, but when we needed something to kick it off, I had like 3 or 4 different kickoff ideas, but that one ended up being the one. So yeah, to.
I love it. It really, from there you're like, I'm hooked. I got to find out who this guy is and, what happens. You lead us through, through your life in the book. And as you get into SEALs and all the other stuff that you've done, you tell us the straight story, to the point that, I've had several, former SEALs or people that have been in sensitive situations and, talk about having to have a manuscript approved and, have it gone over by, people that want to make sure secrets don't get out or whatever. And we talk about redactions and, suggested edits and then demanded edits. And what I thought was hilarious is the way you do it. You leave the redactions in the book. Like, this is the manuscript I wrote and this is what they wanted redacted. And then you put these great footnotes in there, kind of,
yeah, big middle finger.
Use your imagination. Go get a beer and let the alcohol, fill in the imaginative parts. It's so funny. What was that process like? And did you, when you're writing this, were there places where you were like, okay, I know they're going to want this redacted, but for me to get the story out, I've got to tell the whole story. Like, as you're writing, how do you wrestle with that?
Yeah, it's constant. So as soon as you start talking, well, number one, my goal, as you notice, wasn't to write a book to talk about operations, right? It was to tell the stories in the operation. And most of the time I was just trying to get to the funny part or to the sad part or to the, scary part. It's not, I'm not the kind of guy that's going to go and I want to tell you all the things I got to do. It was more about the personal experience of it all. And that me and, the guys I did work with, we are flawed and we make our mistakes and nothing's perfect the first time, like, you'd think. So that's number one. Number two, you're constantly thinking about it. When every word, for example, I didn't write SEAL Team 6 anywhere in the book because I knew when you do the review process, they're lazy and they're using Control F and then so Control, find, and then they'll just type in keywords that they're looking for, right? So they'll type in, let's type in SEAL, and then they'll look at, okay, that popped up, 500 times. Then they'll type in SEAL Team 6. Oh, that popped up 0. So I was kind of hedging and gaming it a little. So I didn't put names of any commands or anything in there because I knew that they'll just search and destroy. I also know that it's a very subjective process where I created a motto for them that I had in one of the footnotes, but I don't think it made it into the book, which was, when in doubt, black it out. Right. And so it's very subjective. It's every single footnote basically is a big middle finger to the Pentagon because I was so careful in what I wrote. They even redacted things that I did as in my company, Escape the Wolf. And I was like, you can't redact that. I was retired. Right. So I chose to unredact it. I was like, I'm not following it. What that told me is the people reviewing it weren't paying attention, right? They're just kind of skimming through it and they go, oh man, that sounds secret. I'm going to black it out. Oh, that sounds sensitive. I'm going to black it out. The reality is I would never go down the path of including anything that I thought was truly classified, secret, no foreign, top secret, SCI. There are standards in place. And when you work that career long enough, what is secret, what is not, but they don't care. And that's kind of the David versus Goliath situation of it all is they're going to mark it out and you really can't argue with them. There's nothing you can do about it.
Well, and I forget where it was, but there was one section of the book, there was a redaction, and your footnote, said that this was non-classified. This was just, public knowledge or could be. But I'm assuming you left the redaction in because you were active duty at the time and just didn't want that fight.
Yeah, you get it back with the blackouts, and then they say, hey, you can contest anything in here, but now it's a timeline issue. They already sat on the book for 10 months, right? Your book is you're out of your control for 10 months, and your manuscript is basically copied and sent to every agency you can think of. And so you have, a half a dozen to a dozen people reviewing your manuscript, blacking out what they think is sensitive. And then they consolidate those manuscripts back at the Pentagon, and the Pentagon goes through all, let's say, dozen manuscripts. And okay, all right. And then once you get it all consolidated together, it's a mess. But anyway, we got through it, and you end up moving stories around, changing things here and there, so that you can actually have a publishable, book.
Right. Well, and I know you didn't set out to give, it's not a minute by minute recreation of actual events that happened. Like you said earlier, it's more about the story of the people that were there and what you guys were going through and how you how you live in that situation.
Yeah.
And people, we read books, we watch movies because we want to feel something. We want to be excited. We want to feel the pain of someone else. We want to laugh. We want to feel something, and that's what I really took away from this book. Is you gave me that feeling of fraternity and brotherhood, and a taste of what it must have been like to live that adrenaline, soaked life. And so yeah, kudos on the tone of the book. You really nailed it.
Good, thank you. That was the goal.
So, yeah, absolutely. And, I laughed. I felt my heart sink more than, a dozen times. Just an amazing, accomplishment. You did the audiobook for this, didn't you?
I did. That's 5 days of torture that I don't recommend anybody do. Yeah, every sentence you're in a chamber. You've got a sound engineer in one room. You've got people on from Simon and Schuster in New York listening in, and they're stopping you every two sentences. Oh, can you articulate that word a little bit better? Can you use a little more emotion? Oh, no, you slurred when you said hour. It's like, oh God. So yeah, 5 days straight, 8 hours a day. Yeah,
that's
one
murder.
big migraine.
That's murder. Yeah. Were you happy that you got to do it though, and not turn over to someone else? I guess what I'm asking is, you have control of how the story is told, and someone else may have interpreted your words differently, and used different inflections here that may have given. Was that something that you thought about at all? And
yeah, actually, I was glad in the end that they talked me into it, and I have gotten nothing but positive feedback about that. There's a lot of people out there that buy the books and follow along with the audio, which I highly recommend, because my book is, like all my books, it's illustrated. And so people that do audio, they're really missing a cool component that I feel is really important. And that's that imagery and painting the picture of the stories that I tell. But so the ones that have listened to it and also read it are like, man, when you listen to it, then it really resonates and you really understand everything far better. Not that you can't when you read it, but when you read it, you're left to your own imagination interpretation. Whereas when you hear it, just like with anything, you get a whole other effect. And so, yeah, I'm glad I did it.
yeah, the drawings, I meant to bring that up earlier. I'm glad you did. There are sections in the book, and there are tons of these through the book, where you've got these like comic panel pages illustrating what you're talking about, and sometimes giving us maybe a glimpse into some of the redacted material, or at least, kind of painting a better picture What was was that your idea to do the drawings, or how did that come about?
Yeah, it was. I have had illustration, 100 Daily Skills was all illustrated. I love, like, I kind of enjoyed drawing when I grew up. I wasn't a great illustrator, but it certainly was a hobby for me. I wish I could be like, these guys, man, they do a great job. And especially Tom, that did The Right Kind of Crazy, he is a DC Marvel illustrator. You know what I mean? He's like tip of the spear, probably one of the best. He did the entire, Batman versus Superman series for DC. But he did a great job taking the stories and turning them into art. And I knew that I wanted 3 components to this book. I actually wanted more, but the publisher wouldn't let me put emojis. I kind of was like, wanted to be the first to, at the end of a sentence, put a little, laugh out loud face, or people communicate that way now. And I felt like publishers are very traditional still, and I think they need to like get with it. I was telling my editor, I'm like, dude, people communicate more with emojis via text than probably anything else now. It's crazy not to put emojis into this damn book. And it was a full-on week-long argument with my editor, but he finally won. And I was like, fine. But the other elements, which is good narrative, right? A good story. That's number 1. Number 2, illustrations, and they have to be good ones that really tie everything together that you're reading. And number 3 were what I call my thought bubbles, which ended up being the footnotes. And so those 3 elements, I think, as far as military memoirs go, sets it apart from the rest, and hopefully sets kind of like a new standard of creativity when people write books, that it doesn't just have to be words on pages anymore. You can put more into it. And not to mention the media and the press and everybody, they only lock on to the really unique, taboo, against the grain kind of stuff. So if you want to get some traction with the media, then you've got to add in you have to add more. You can't just write a book anymore. There's so many books out there. You're competing against so many people. You have to come up with creative ways to make yourself stand out against the crowd. So that was my way of doing it. Absolutely. Well,
the book is The Right Kind of Crazy: My Life as a Navy SEAL, Covert Operative, and Boy Scout from Hell. Clint, I love this book. I'm going to give some copies of it away as Christmas presents. I think other people should too. There's going to be a link to it in the show notes of this episode. If people are just learning about you, is there a place where they can connect with you online to dig into all the great stuff that you do?
Oh, yeah, of course. You can go to ClintEmerson.com. My entire ecosystem is there, to include publications, information about my company, and then, I've got T-shirts. Got to have a T-shirt, so I got T-shirts people can buy too.
Love it. Clint, I absolutely love the book. Like I said, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show with me today.
No, thanks for having me. It's been a great conversation.